Hey everyone, Ray Knight here. Given my last video, I want to go ahead and continue the talk about reboots and reimaginings on old series. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to talk about Pokemon Go. And no, it's not going to be just a ragfest on Pokemon Go. I'm going to talk about what they did right, what they did wrong, what they can improve right now, and what is already just fucked up beyond repair. I've made some similar videos in the past, but I've also gone ahead, taken a look at the things that they've done recently, some of the recent changes that they've been doing, and I've been talking with a few of the local Pokemon Go players in my area to see how it's actually been affecting my area and not just, the general populace. Seeing if their experiences have actually been mirroring that of what Niantic is saying that they're changing. So, what are the positives to Pokemon Go? Well, for one, it motivates you to get up and get out. Okay, cool. Well, at least that was the case. But now it still is, because I've actually started up again recently, and I've noticed that there's a lot more spawns, and actually varied spawns. But I'll get to how I've noticed that in a bit. But another thing is they really seem to be getting the Pokeball throwing dialed in. I kind of prefer, back when I was still playing before this last break that I took, I kind of prefer that, where it had more of that kind of lofty feel to it. But with this one, at least it makes it to where those farther out Pokemon, when you do get that great throw, or when you do get that excellent throw, it feels completely earned. So, good on them for that. And it provides a challenge. You get enough Pokeballs from Pokestops to be able to warrant it, as long as you have at least a few Pokestops near where you live. If you have to drive for half an hour for the nearest fucking Pokestop, I can see it being an issue. But let's go ahead and take a look at some other positives. Some other positives is they've actually released a lot more Pokemon already than what I expected them to have released by this point. So, good on them for that. They're not slacking there. The character models are actually really good. Absolutely love what they've done with it, and with the actions of them and that sort of thing. They all seem to really fit. So, alright. Good job on that. I've actually always liked the user interface for looking up information for the Pokemon and that sort of thing. And you can go ahead and use an IV calculator if you want to go ahead and know your Pokemon's IVs and all that. So I can understand them not having like the star or anything like that from Sun and Moon. I understand that. If they introduce it later, that would be awesome. But they probably won't introduce that until at least breeding. And they've already said that they're not going to be doing breeding for a while. We're going to touch on that later. In fact, we're going to be touching on that relatively soon. But another positive thing, I honestly think that they actually have the coins priced fairly, especially since you can earn some free coins as long as you're willing to go ahead and do the gym battle system. So technically someone can play this game completely free to play. They just have to be really dedicated. But they're wanting to earn some money off of it, so alright, fine. It's actually a relatively fair system. And the thing is buying bag upgrades and that sort of thing really doesn't cost that much. So, not an issue. It's actually priced affordably. Is there the $99 microtransaction to buy coins? Yeah. Would I buy that? If I had the $99 and it was still as fun of a game as it was at release? Yeah, I would. And I would recommend other people do it, because then you can go ahead, buy all of the bag space that you're going to need, all the storage space for Pokemon that you're going to need, and then some lucky eggs and lures and all that. I prefer lures to incense because of the fact that it helps out other people. But that's just how I am. So, on to the bad. What they really screwed up on was the battle system, no trading, and no breeding. I can understand the breeding because that's going to be very difficult to fully implement. I actually like the egg hatching system, but what I don't like is that you only get one free incubator, and that you can't buy another infinite incubator. That the incubators that you buy are good for 3 eggs. So at that point, you're basically only using them for the 10k eggs to get the most bang for your buck. But the fact that you can't discard eggs, so like if you don't need any Pokemon in the 2k anymore, you're all like, alright, I don't need any more of these Pokemon. You can't discard the eggs. You can't like give them to the professor or anything like that. You have to just sit there and hatch them, which is annoying, and I can't blame people for getting annoyed with it. Because the thing is walking 2 kilometers, that's quite a bit of walking there. It's going to take you a little bit. The speed limiter, that I can understand because they didn't want people driving and playing at the same time, which, alright, fair enough. Go ahead and have the speed limiter for Pokemon showing up on there, or for spinning the Pokestops, yes. But don't do it for the eggs. Because the thing is even in the games, you're allowed to sit there and ride your bike to hatch eggs. So, no. I think that was just them trying to pad out the egg mechanic, trying to get more people to buy coins, to buy those fucking incubators, so they could make more money off of it. That's absolute bullshit. You know it's bullshit, Niantic. Maybe that's something you should change. As far as the battle system is concerned, just the gym system in and of itself. I mean, it's a unique take on it, and I'm not actually all that opposed to it. But when you combine it with the rudimentary battle system, and with the lack of server love that they have, you get a lot of latency, which the latency was already going to be there because it's a mobile game anyway. But then they compounded it with shitty servers. Then you also had the gym glitches in the beginning where you would sit there, it would basically desync, and you would sit there, attack an opponent down to basically 1 HP, and then it didn't matter how many times you hit them, they wouldn't fucking die, and they'd run through your entire group. And you would think if it was a desync thing, that they would heal back up your Pokemon and go, sorry, this gym's glitched out, right? No, they didn't do that. They considered it an actual loss for you, and so you had to sit there and use revives to revive your entire fucking team, and also all the healing items. And they haven't put in anything like Pokemon centers. Now, for me, it's not too big of an issue because you're not battling wild Pokemon, so it's not like you're constantly needing healing and that sort of thing. And as far as potions are concerned, I can't tell you how many potions I've thrown out. Even in my off and on playing. I throw out potions all the fucking time. Like, when my bag gets full, the first thing I check is how many potions do I have. Holy crap, I have way too many, and I throw away 50 or 60 potions. I actually like what they did with the evolution items, so I guess that's another one in the positive tick. But, oh, another positive that they have done, and that I do want to go ahead and bring up, is them making it to where evolved Pokemon give more candies. And then also putting in a berry that allows you to double the amount of candy. So if you're sitting there and doing that, it's actually a choice of berry now, as opposed to before where it's all like, why would you use anything other than, you know, it's all like, before it was just a raspberry, whatever. But the new berries that they put in actually have some good utility, and it actually is a choice since you can only use one berry per Pokeball throw. So, I'm talking about where you hit, and like if they get out, then you have to refeed a berry again. But my problem is when you have an evolved Pokemon or a Pokemon that you've actually leveled up using Stardust and such, you still only get one candy for it. I'm sorry, evolved Pokemon, when you trade them into the Professor, like, if it's a 3-stage evolution Pokemon, let's just go ahead and go with that. The first stage obviously gives you 1. The second stage will sit there and should give you 2 or 3. And the last stage should actually go ahead and give you 4 or 5. That's how I look at it. I mean, hell, maybe even 6. Because the thing is figure it this way. For a 3-stage Pokemon, for you to get that Pokemon up to that 3rd stage of evolution, it takes 150 candies. Good God. That is a lot of fucking candies. And that's not even including the candies that you have to use to go ahead and actually get them leveled up to that highest level. Another thing that I think is a missed opportunity is TMs. They needed to put something like that in there so you could go ahead and teach your Pokemon the moves that you want them to learn, because there's nothing worse than sitting there hatching a Pokemon from an egg, and it's a Pokemon that you want, and then, you know, it having those perfect IVs, but then have the shittiest moveset conceivable on that Pokemon. That absolutely sucks. Or if you get a good Pokemon that you captured in the wild, and it still fucks you. You know, it's all like, oh no, you know, it's got good stats and everything. You know, things like 93% perfect, but it has the shit moveset. Because that all comes down to luck. I mean, at that point, figure it this way. And go ahead and do the math yourself if you want to. I'm not going to do the math right now. But let's say you got yourself an uncommon Pokemon that basically, in essence, you only have a 10% chance of encountering in the wild. Or a 10% chance of it coming out of an egg, or even less, out of an egg. Well, now you've got, you know, those low percent chances of it having good HP, good defense, good attack. So now you've got all those chances compounded. And now you have, you know, these different movesets, and let's say the moveset that you want is, you know, one of the moves is only a 10% chance for that move to be on that Pokemon, and the other one's a 25% chance. So now you're compounding those odds on top of everything else, And you're just sitting there like, what in the fuck? And then even if you do get that one, to get it up to battle ready, more than likely it's not going to have a high starting CP, or at least not max. So then you have to spend not only candies on that, but also Stardust, which you only get 100 Stardust from each Pokemon capture. There's no way to increase that. There's no alternative way of getting Stardust. And Stardust ends up actually being the limiting factor for people that want to get into the gym battling system. So how do you get Stardust? You have to go ahead and just capture a whole bunch of Pokemon. Yeah, your first Pokemon capture of the day, you get like 700 Stardust. Alright, cool. Except for the fact that when you get up into those upper CP levels, it can sit there and cost you like 10 or 12 grand. And that's even if your level, which actually limits the CP level, but if your level as your trainer level is only in the low 20s or mid 20s, it still can sit there and cost you that much. It can cost you even more in those upper levels. So you can sit there and have it where you go out and you farm and you're capturing anything and everything that pops up, even if it's just to trade it in, just so you can go ahead and get the Stardust, right? Let's say you, for some odd reason, have all of the candies you could possibly ever need. Still, you now have a time limiter on Stardust. So for you to actually get a full team with at least decent IVs and decent and a good level for your trainer level, as well as getting them evolved. Let's say all of them, take, all of them are 3 evolution Pokemon. Well, that means you're going to have to capture, just to get them evolved, over 45 of those Pokemon. You're also going to have to capture a Pokemon. You're going to have to capture one of those Pokemon that has a good moveset, and that you pray keeps that good moveset as it goes through the evolutions, because it basically gets re-rolled at that point. I mean, when you look at it, it's all like, to get a full team, I mean, you're going to be playing for years. Unless you were extremely fucking lucky with your egg hatches, or with your wild catches. And if the Pokemon that you want are actually rare Pokemon, well, now you have that rarity to deal with. There are some Pokemon that have a 1% chance of ever showing up. And sometimes that's the only way you can get them, is through through eggs. Like me, the only chance I stand of getting a Lapras is through a fucking egg. Same thing with Aerodactyl. I've gotten an Aerodactyl and it had shit fucking stats and a shit fucking moveset. Fuck my life. I did get lucky with 2 eggs out of however many I've fucking hatched. I did get lucky with 2 eggs, because I got a Snorlax in one that had exceedingly good stats, especially for how low of a level I was when I hatched it. And then I got a perfect IV and good moveset Nidoran female, which is now a Nidoqueen. But even with that Pokemon having that, as far as battle is concerned, even for defensive purposes, not all that great. But that's me being lucky. So it really gets frustrating for people, and I can understand it. Now, there is one other thing, and everyone under the sun's bitched and griped about it, except for people that live in major cities, and that is the tracking system. a lot of people definitely preferred the original tracking system. So, sorry about that. My dog's got an upper respiratory tract infection, so not much I can do about that. So, I do apologize for those of you who are kind of getting grossed out by it or freaked out. But, the tracking system. People preferred the old tracking system. At least a lot of people did. Some people like the new tracking system. But the thing is we're going to get into the this can be fixed relatively easy section of the video. How about this? Go ahead and have 2 tabs. Have one with the old school tracking system and one with the location tracking system that they have right now. You know, the point-to-point. Why not go ahead and do that? So people who prefer one can go ahead and use it. Others that prefer the other one can go ahead and use that. And then for people like me that see merit in both of them, can go ahead and switch back and forth between them at will. So if you're going to be sitting there and hanging around an area with a bunch of Pokestops, you know, you go ahead and flip on the current tracking system so you get an idea of what's near those Pokestops. But then you can switch over to the adventure finding and not have to wander aimlessly like a fucking dipshit just hoping to trip across something. But with their current setup, it's the worst of both worlds. Because even if you are nowhere near any Pokestops, then the nearby tracking system still doesn't let you know how far away those Pokemon are. And then putting that grass there next to them where the footprints used to be, I'm sorry, that's a slap to the fucking face. Especially because they know people liked that older system. That is absolutely ridiculous. Now, how can they fix that and not have the server issues? Well, for one, they don't really have to worry about too many server issues, do they? Since their user base is so damn low now. And then on top of that, they have made more than enough money to go ahead and sink some of it into the fucking servers. And beef them up to actually give people the service that they deserve at this point. And if you're going to sit there and try to say, oh, well, that's pretty self-entitled. Well, yeah. We've dealt with the bullshit for so fucking long. Not me necessarily. I just pop in and out checking to see if they've pulled their heads out of their asses yet. But the people who have stuck around all this time and who for some odd reason still have faith that Niantic will actually fucking realize that, hey, they're a business and they have to be competitive because all it'll take is one company coming out and bringing out something similar just without the downfalls that Niantic has now built into the game. You know, it would ruin Niantic at that point. I mean, hell, at this point, Niantic's already the fucking laughingstock. People are still fucking poking fun at them. Especially with their consistently dropping numbers of people. And I think it's fucking hilarious that now, after they've lost the vast majority of their user base, all of a sudden they're all like, oh, well, we're starting up an active Twitter account where, you know, we'll actually fucking respond to people's complaints. Yeah, little too late. At this point, now you have to start proactively looking at what people were saying in the past and start implementing the shit if you want your customers back. The number one thing would be bringing back the old tracker. If they were to just do that, just that one fucking thing, I guarantee you a lot of people would come back. But if they're not going to do that, they need to at least allow the API to be open again. So that way tracker sites can go up. I personally am not a fan of having to use tracker sites. But right now, I've actually got a tracker site saved in my bookmarks for my local area, because a bunch of people from my local area all got together and contacted Niantic en masse and said, hey, if you open this up, you're going to stop bleeding people. So guess what? For our area, they actually opened up the API. And so we actually have a functional tracker system. And guess what? More and more people, as they're hearing about that, are starting to fucking play. Oh my god, it's almost like people don't want to sit there and hang out at a Pokestop just hoping that the Pokemon that they want pops up there, or be forced to go out and wander aimlessly out into traffic hoping to find a fucking Pokemon before they get hit. It's almost like people don't like just wandering around staring at their fucking phone hoping for some digital creature to pop up so they can go ahead and do that after they've walked for fucking, 8 or 9 kilometers for one capture. It's almost like they like to know at least the general area where shit's supposed to be. Even if it requires a bit of walking. But we'll see how that pans out. So far, looking good. I mean, hell, it got me to fucking re-download the game and to fire it up again. But I wish that it didn't have to be a tracking site. But I took a look at the tracking site, which shows me all the Pokemon in the area, and I've been watching the spawn patterns and that sort of thing for the last day or so. And guess what? The spawns are much more varied. The spawn rates are actually much, much higher. At least in certain areas, where there's a lot of cellular activity, which is understandable. So, at least they've got that going for them. At least they are doing that. I mean, do you see a lot of repeats? Well, yeah. But that's because it's a biome-based system. So, alright, fair enough. But at least there's enough differential now. Because it was before, when I would sit there and look at the tracking sites, in the entirety of my town, you might have 1 or 2 not Rapidash, but Ponyta pop up every other day. And now there's almost always a Ponyta around somewhere in my town. And I'm talking about town-wide, so it's still not all that great, but just to show. And now we actually have 2 nests here instead of just the 1. So that's kind of nice as well. And the cool thing about those nests is they're still where there's good cell phone signal, but also it's very nature-oriented. So it's nature trails. So that's kind of cool in and of itself. But another thing that they could easily improve is the battle system. The way that they would do that, improve the move learning system by implementing some type of TM. Even if they have it where, it's basically a random item drop, kind of like an evolution item, it's still a fine thing. Or if they sit there and have a TM shop. That would be a great way of them making money, in small bursts. So as people are raising Pokemon for battle, then yeah. Now on to needed features. They have to put in trading. And the thing is what they really need to do is put in a global trade. And to those who want to sit there and say, oh, well, that would ruin the regional exclusives. No, it wouldn't. Because people are still going to have to trade with those people for those regional exclusives. I don't see a problem with that. What I do see a problem with is them sitting there and going, oh yeah, well, you have to be within X amount of feet of the person. That is a fucking issue. That is a real fucking issue. I'm all like, did you not fucking learn from those instances where people were were popping lures onto Pokestops that were in somewhat out of the way areas, popping those on there and then jumping people and stealing their phones and beating the shit out of them and all that? No, that's fucking dangerous. Not to mention with all the child abductions on a worldwide scale that are going on right now. Really? With the sheer lawlessness that's going on? And this is from a US-based company. It's like they don't even pay attention to the outside world anymore. It's like everything that they know ends at their office. So, yeah, actually implementing some type of global trade. Like, even if they have it where it's a limited thing, like where you can only do a global trade once a week. And then you can do unlimited local trades. Alright, fine. But at least have something there. Because another big issue is they're sitting there and saying, oh, well, we don't want spoofers. Yet they are necessitating people using spoofing. Because of these regional exclusives. Like I've said, not everyone can afford to travel to these other fucking countries. And asking them to do so for your game is fucking ridiculous. Talk about fucking ego. But trading should have been one of those things that that should have been in there from the very get-go. I mean, for Christ's sake, this is Pokemon. It's one of the big things. Now, breeding is one of those things, like I said, I can understand them taking some time with it, especially since they're going to have to work around their bullshit egg system. But this is also a chance for them to make the egg system worthwhile. Gonna leave it at that. We'll wait and see what they do with the breeding system if the game even survives that long. But now there are a few things where it's all like, you know what, they've fucked it up to the point where it's probably never going to get fixed and couldn't even be fixed without completely revamping the game. Those are few and far in between. There's very little that can't be fixed in a game like this. One of those things is the Pokestops. Because they based it off of the points from their previous game, which, I mean, it wasn't the worst idea at all, but they needed to sit there and look at areas that were pretty sparse and go, we should add some shit. Take a look and, make sure they weren't adding it in people's houses and that sort of thing, but add some extra Pokestops there, just to make it fair for the rural players. Or maybe they could even go ahead and host something. You know, like, it's all like, look, if you're in a rural area, go ahead, submit it, and we'll go ahead and check your area. And if there's not and you know, have a density cutoff, you know, where if there's large swaths without Pokestops, like, hell, there are large swaths in my town without Pokestops. All the Pokestops in my town tend to be focused in 2 or 3 areas of the town, and they're all across town from each other. Like, you might have one here, one there, but it's very fucking rare in between when you're not in one of those giant clusters. So, maybe go ahead and have an event where, you know, they're all like, go ahead and submit, you know, of course, submit a photo during the daytime, photo, you know, of an area, and say this should be a Pokestop, and them check, and if there's and of course, you know, have it as a thing in the app where you know, click the picture. You know, maybe even have some incentive there for people to go ahead and go out to those areas and do that. Like, you know, if it gets accepted, or if one that's in a similar area gets accepted, you know, if they're within a certain amount of meters away from each other, and they get accepted, you get like 10 Pokecoins. You know, go ahead and sit there, reward the people at that point. You're going to get a lot more activity. But hell, even without that, people would be more than willing to just head out and go boom, 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 boom. You know, going, please get some fucking Pokestops out here. You're not going to end up with overcrowded cities, because then, you know, you're going to sit there, you're going to have it sit there and scan an area of Pokestops, because they have a fucking map of it in their computer system. It's all like it scans for in a certain radius, and if there's a certain amount of Pokestops within that area, then it gets denied. But if there aren't, then the Pokestop gets confirmed. Why not have something like that? I don't see a fucking issue with it. And of course, make it to where it can't be in residential areas, which is pretty easy to tell where a residential area is. If there's a bunch of apartments and shit, well, that's a residential area. Maybe don't put Pokestops there. Would that require some work on Niantic's part? Yes, but actually a lot less than you might think. They'd only have to have a few people looking at that shit. Would it take a while for it to all get implemented? Of course. But the people that are still around have shown, if nothing else, that they have patience. And so if they know that this is being worked on, it'll be something where, you know, they'll appreciate it, and it'll get more people to come back, which means more microtransactions, which means more revenue. I'm not seeing a downside. So I guess that one shouldn't be in that last list, because it can actually relatively easily be fixed. Another thing that can be fixed, but I think this one would be a little bit harder, is rebalancing the biomes. They need to actually take a look at areas and refigure out the biomes. And they actually need to match Pokemon up to the biomes. Because I'm so sorry, there should never be a fucking Magmar nest right next to a riverbank. Not on a major river. I mean, if there's a creek going through, alright, whatever. But not a major river. Like where I live, there's a park right next to a right next to a huge fucking river. In fact, it's a river that runs almost the entire length of our state. Like I said, I live in California. And yes, the river I'm talking about is the Sacramento River. It runs all the way down to the Bay Area and into the Bay. It's a pretty big river, especially since I live up towards the northern portion of it, where the major water pressure is. So that means that river's pretty fucking wide. It's not small. And where I live, there's a park right on the side of it. And guess what? Magmar Nest. Really? Well, at least it was Magmar Nest. Now it's a Scyther Nest, but whatever. But that sort of shit shouldn't fucking happen. But we also have a lot of mountainous trails near where I live. So, you would think that going out on those mountainous trails, which do still have good signal, and people are constantly on their phones out on those too, you would think, alright, cool, I can go there and catch me some fucking Geodude. Nope. Almost barren. For me to actually really have a chance of finding Geodudes, I have to sit there and drive about 2.5 hours down south to go ahead and even attempt to find them, and I have to go into the core of a fucking larger city. Like that makes any fucking sense. I mean, here I am, living in a mountainous region, and I have to drive away from the mountains to find a fucking Geodude. Really? Hell, one of my buddies that I know from school, I talk to him on a regular basis, and guess what? He lives out on the edge of a fucking desert. Guess what he hasn't seen one of? He hasn't seen a Sandshrew. He hasn't seen a Diglett. You know what they have commonly around there? Fucking Squirtle. So yeah, they need to revamp the fucking biome system. It's almost like they just plopped down random biomes and went, yeah, that's good. And I'm not even sitting there and bitching about, Charmander or Charmeleon or Charizard popping up at the local YMCA pool. Whatever. But I'm talking about major fucking areas should at least have some sort of semblance of sanity. Can I see Rattatas being all over the place? Yes. Can I see Pidgeys being all over the place? Yes. Spinarak, of course. But why in the hell would you have a water Pokemon be common in a fucking desert? And yet have desert Pokemon not ever show up? I don't get it. And yeah, my buddy, no. He lives in Nevada. In fact, he lives in Reno. Not exactly a small town. In fact, they're only a few hours away from Las Vegas. Even in Las Vegas, guess what? Sandshrew, Diglett, not really, no. Of course, you're also not getting Squirtles there. But what are you getting? Tauros. Lots of them. And I just look at that and I'm like, really? Really? I mean, I can see California having a lot of Tauros. I can see the northern states having a lot of Tauros. But really? Las Vegas? No. That should be Diglett, Dugtrio, Sandshrew, and Sandslash-Heaven. But it's just, I don't understand why. I really don't understand why they showed so little thought with the biomes. That's something that needs to be fixed, but it's something that probably won't. Because people in big cities, you know, like LA and such, and Las Vegas is a large city, don't get me wrong. You know, they've got a wide variety of Pokemon. And I can understand there being electric Pokemon there. Do I really need to say why? Hell, I could see there being Jinx there. And I swear to God, once they get to the 6th gen Pokemon, if they get that fucking far, or not 6th gen, but 7th gen Pokemon, if the water starter isn't in Las Vegas, there's a problem. Just like the fire starter for the 7th gens needs to be in New Mexico. Straight the fuck up. But no, the thing is the people in large cities aren't bitching and complaining about this because they get all the rare ones. I mean, hell, the rarest Pokemon that we get up here is Dratini. And guess what shows up down at the pier in San Francisco? Yeah. So, but what I do like is that I have been seeing a wider variety of Pokemon in non-major cities. So that is kind of a cool thing. I'm glad that they're doing that, but I'm just saying, if they're going to even have a biome system, they need to actually adhere to the biome system. Just saying. Because if not, then that's wasting space on the servers, and it just makes their excuse for not having the old tracking system even less valid. But I'm pretty sure there's some things that I missed. If you've played Pokemon Go, if you've stopped playing Pokemon Go, go ahead and mention anything that you think I might have missed down in the comments. If you've heard of them planning on fixing any of the things that I brought up, go ahead and let me know down in the comments. And I'm not bitching about any of the world events, but I will throw in this one last thing at the end here. Seriously, Niantic, you're a US-based company. I understand that Pokemon is from a Japanese-based company, but stop giving all of the major events to Japan. stop. I can understand you having some events where, you know, it's to help stimulate their economy after, you know, the earthquake or after a tsunami or whatever. I get that. But the thing is maybe actually spread the love to other regions of the world instead of just Japan. Because as much as I would love to go and visit Japan, it ain't gonna be because of your fucking game.